Hello everyone. Good afternoon. Moed Tov. Yeah, you were probably expecting a Chag Sameach. Well, it's not Chag, it's Moed. It's Chol HaMoed. It's in between the beginning and the end of Pesach, so it's Moed Tov. That's a good greeting for these days. But nevertheless, we welcome everyone to this new edition of Torah L'Chaim. So, I can see here Shelly Chochinov is already connected. I don't know if somebody before Shelly actually typed into the chat because I had it closed before. So that's the first message I can read. But anyway, just a quick reminder that the chat is open. So if you want to type any message to communicate with me or to each other, please use the chat. We are streaming live on YouTube and Facebook. Alain and the Judge. Sounds like a title of a movie, but I know what you mean. Okay, thank you, Shelly. So, welcome everyone. We already had 3 classes related to Pesach. Remember? Rocky Polex is counting on you, Rabbi. I am wondering if that's a play with the words, because the title of this class is counting of the Omer. Well, you can actually see here the wheat that is related to the class. We are going to see that in a minute. Why is that related? Yeah, today we are going to study about the counting of the Omer. And I said we already studied 3 things before. 3 things. Hi, Judy. We prepare ourselves for Pesach. We try to learn some new tunes for Pesach before YouTube police actually stopped the stream for a little bit. Then we went through some insights for the Seder to have something nice to say or to share with family and friends. And today we are going to study about what's going on in between Pesach and Shavuot. It's almost like Pesach and Shavuot are connected in a way that it makes one long holiday. It's a 50-day long holidays. It reminds me somehow to the Shmini Atzeret, which is at the end of Sukkot, and how connects Sukkot to another holiday that is Shmini Atzeret and Simchat Torah. The only difference is because it's only 1 week in between the two, we don't really feel that they are 2 separate holidays. Sometimes we count them together. And in this case, Pesach and Shavuot is 50 days different, so we think they are different, but they are so interconnected that it's almost like we are talking about one long festival that is 50 days long. And hopefully we are going to see why. But first, if this is the first time you catch one of our streams, hi Murray, good afternoon. If this is the first time you catch one of our streams, or you haven't subscribed in the past, remember? Subscribe to our channels. Hit the bell so you will be notified every time we go live or every time we upload something to our channels. And we do lots of these things during the week. Also, give us the thumbs up. That really helps our channel. And we also like to see all this thumbs up at the end of every video. So let's start now with the class itself. And we have to talk about this counting of the Omer. I don't know if you've been counting. We already counted a few days. We'll say in a minute. But we have this special count from Pesach to Shavuot. Every night, starting on the night of the second Seder, we have to count the Omer. It's a mitzvah. It's a commandment from the Torah. This is not even something created by the rabbis, okay? Very important to know. Every time you have a mitzvah, you have to kind of start figuring out if it's from the Torah, is it from the rabbis, or is it tradition? So basically we have 3 sources of mitzvot. Torah, we call it deoraita, is Aramaic, fancy words for from the Torah, deoraita. It could be from the rabbis, and in Aramaic we call it the Rabbanan, okay? Or could be minhag, which is tradition. You probably know that word, the minhag. Like for example, the wearing the kippah is a mitzvah, but it's a minhag. It's a minhag. It started as a tradition, then eventually became a law. So the counting of the Omer is coming from the Torah. So whenever something is coming from the Torah and you want to learn about it, the first thing you have to do is to go to the Torah and read it from there. Of course, every mitzvah listed in the Torah eventually is going to be fine-tuned by the rabbis. Am I clear about that? So yeah, you could say at the end of the day that every mitzvah that we fulfill is coming from the rabbis, because even though the source is in the Torah, the application of the mitzvah or the way we do it is as defined by the rabbis. Okay? So let's see what the Torah say about this counting from Pesach to Shavuot. And in order to do that, we have to go to the book of Leviticus, chapter 23, verses 9 to 11. And it says, God spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak to the children of Israel and say to them, when you come to the land that I'm giving you, and you reap the harvest, you shall bring the Omer." What is the Omer? We don't know. That's why I didn't want to translate that. "Of the first of your harvest to the Kohen," to the priest. "He shall wave the Omer before God to be an appeasement for you." When we have to do that, the Torah says, on the day following the Shabbat, the Kohen shall wave it. Is that clear? I will say not so much, because it doesn't say how we had to do it in these days, for starters. It doesn't make it clear what does it mean on the day following the Shabbat, which Shabbat. Doesn't say. So that's why I say that every mitzvah in the Torah has to be fine-tuned by the rabbis. This is a perfect example why. Because sometimes it's not so clear. And also we don't really know what the Omer is. So, yeah. So, let's go part by part. And what is this? So in order to do that, first we have to understand what the Omer is. The period of the Omer derives its name from a special sacrificial offering that was brought in the temple. Before any newly grown grains, wheat, barley, oats, rye, and spelt, may be eaten, the equivalent of 1 day's worth of barley flour for one person must be offered in the temple on the second day of Pesach. This offering of barley flour is not as the Omer offering. Hello, Debbie Pollock, welcome. And so you understand here, there is sort of an agreement that the Omer is coming from barley. How much barley? There are different opinions, but let's say for a minute that the Omer is the equivalent for 1 day worth of barley flour for one person. Okay, not much. And we are used to sacrifices that involve animals. So this is a grain offering coming from barley. Why barley? Because Pesach is the season of harvesting the barley. And even eventually Shavuot will be the season of harvest of wheat, that it takes a little longer. Okay, so that we can understand why Pesach is all about barley. Okay. So it's almost that this is that offering would allow us to unlock all the other grains. So if you want to eat the grains that you can harvest that season, first you have to bring the Omer to the temple, that measurement of grain, and to offer it in the altar. When you do that, the day after Shabbat, that in this case, you can see there, is it on the second day of Pesach. But that is not what the text said. I don't know if you remember that. I will put it back for you. You see, it doesn't say there second day of Pesach. It says the day following the Shabbat. So how can you explain that? Why would the rabbi say the day after Pesach if the text in Leviticus says the day following the Shabbat? Well, let me tell you that this was a big controversy in between the Rabbanites and the Karaites. Remember, we talk about these two groups all the time. Rabbanites are Well, we are the Rabbanites, the one we follow the teachings of the rabbis, which means the one we follow the teachings of the Talmud, let's put it that way, the ones we believe that there is such thing as oral law to explain everything that is not explained in the Torah. Okay, so basically the rabbi said that we learn by the means of oral law, by oral explanation from God to Moses, that the word Shabbat in this verse means Pesach. And you will say, what? How in this world they read Pesach if it clearly said Shabbat? And the rabbi said, no, what it says is day of rest. So read it this way. You have to present the Omer on the day following the day of rest. And they say that Pesach is also a day of rest. Okay, maybe. But the controversy here is that the Karaites, the one who rejected the oral law, they actually read Shabbat. And they understand that this is talking about the first Shabbat after the first night of Pesach. Okay? You follow me? They both agree that the harvest and the Omer is happening on Pesach because Pesach is Chag HaAviv, is the festival of the spring, and the spring is the beginning of the harvest, at least of the barley. So the Karaites read the first Shabbat after the beginning of Pesach, and the rabbis read on the day following the beginning of Pesach. The difference between the two, the practical application of the two, is very significant. Because for the rabbis, by deciding to read Shabbat as Pesach, then Shavuot, which is going to be 50 days after, will be always on the same date. Okay? For the Karaites, it won't. Because they start counting after the first Shabbat after Pesach, which will change dates every year. So unless that you have a very sophisticated calendar, it would be very difficult to know the date of Shavuot in advance. Okay? Yeah, I guess it will always be on the same day of the week. I believe it comes on a Sunday, because if it's 7 weeks. So they already know that Shavuot is always going to be on a Sunday, but they don't know which number, which date. For the rabbis, I believe they did it for the sake of clarity, for the sake of being able to plan in advance. So they decided to read Shabbat as Pesach. So we all present this offering that day. Well, we don't have the temple, so we don't have to do a physical presentation of the Omer, of the grains, but we understand that it's the beginning of a period that it will go from that date all the way to Shavuot, and we are going to see in a minute how that happens. Dr. Debbie Pollack, you said maybe because at Pesach is Eliyahu, the running of the Mashiach will be restful. Yeah, no, but the Pesach, it is a day of rest. I won't discuss that with the rabbis. I mean, it's a little, but I believe they stretch the translation a little bit, but nevertheless, they are, I guess, correct. Yeah. Let's continue a little bit. Let's read a few more things about this before we go into the counting itself. Let's try to understand some of the symbolisms of this Omer that we present on Pesach. Yeah, Rabbi Ezekiah ben Manoach, also known as Hizkuni, said, it will not be appropriate to eat from the new harvest without bringing a portion of it as a gift of thanks to God. Okay, he said, let's put the controversy of the date aside. What he says is, perhaps we can all agree how important it is, this offering. I guess it's if you're about to eat the fruits of the earth, he understands it's appropriate to bring an offering of that to the temple, to say in advance, thanks to God for all the blessings that we are going to receive on that harvesting season, which is a very interesting concept, this concept of thanking God in advance. I think theologically could be very useful to learn this principle, thanking God in advance. Because we usually complain about what we don't have to God. God, how come you didn't give me this? How come you didn't do that? Instead of saying, thank you, God, for the blessings I know you're going to send. It's a beautiful concept. So we thank God in advance. Of course, there's going to be another gift at the end of the harvest on Shavuot. It's a bigger offering. But at the beginning, it's a very basic one. If you think about it, the Omer is very small. It's a small token of our appreciation to God for all this grain that we are about to get from the ground. Okay, that's what Chizkuni is saying. And Debbie Pollack said, God wants the first of everything. Firstborn, first animal, first bikrim. Yeah. But this is the surprising thing of this is how small it is. How small it is. And it doesn't even mean that it's first fruit or anything. Just a little bit of grain as an offering to God. And then there is nothing until Shavuot. Okay? That's interesting to notice. Now, let's read a little bit from the Midrash. And Vayikra Rabbi, it says, Rabbi Yanai say, the way of the world is that when a person buys some meat from the market, he must expend so much effort and hard work until he cooks it. Yet, while people are sleeping, God makes the wind blow and brings the clouds, which cause the plants to grow and nourish the fruits. And we only pay him, God, the value of an Omer. This is the meaning of the verse, you shall bring an Omer of the first of your harvest to the Kohen. Basically here, the Midrash saying is, how great is God? Do you realize that, yes, the farmers, they have to work hard to seed the field. You have to do it, otherwise you won't have any crops. But after you did that, God took over from there, because it doesn't matter, a farmer can go every day if he wants to the field and just sitting there staring at the field to see, but you say nothing happened. Nothing will happen. It will depend. It's not up to the farmer anymore after you finish seeding. Then it's up to God to bring the right winds and the right amount of rain and the right amount of sun and everything until you get eventually your crops. And you would say that is lots of things have to happen, and yet all what God wants from you is the tiny little Omer, just to be sure that you know what's going on. The Midrash understand it's just for that, so you will know what's going on. That it's not all up to you. It's not that you work so hard planting. Lots of other things have to happen from God's point of view for you to have that barley. So take a little bit of that, bring it to God. That's it. Just a tiny little bit. God is not even asking you to take food out of the table of your family. Just a tiny little bit. Wonderful. Wonderful, wonderful. Let's continue. You see, this is a common thing in Judaism. In order that a person should not, God forbid, think, my might and the strength of my hands. This is us. We believe that we are responsible for everything we have. You see, he should not think, I plowed and planted and now I'm harvesting. I am the one who produced the grain. No. Therefore, the Torah teaches him that he did not do it with his own strength. Rather, God gave him the sustenance, and everything comes from God. How is this lesson taught? Through the fact that we give God the first and most precious portion of the grain. We thus admit that everything comes from God. When we connect the first portion to God, the first portion reflects on all the portions, and everything becomes sanctified. This is beautiful, because it's also an idea that once you do that and you recognize at the beginning of the harvest that everything is coming from God, then hopefully you will have that thought in mind every day of the harvest. So it's not just a moment that you give this offering and then you forget. It's something that will teach you a life lesson. A life lesson. That everything, even our strength and our brains, are coming from God, and we need to be thankful. Rocky Pollack, he said, what if your harvest comes from land that you have reclaimed by irrigating and fertilizing, not merely relying on divine nurturing? Yeah. But I mean, you do, of course we do everything. We irrigate, we fertilize, whatever you, but who is giving you that? Who allows you to have that? Or the brains to create a methodology to fertilize and to irrigate. That's the concept here. Because yes, you could be in a land where you don't have natural rain, or sometimes in Israel where it used to be a desert and now it's a beautiful land that they can produce fruits and vegetables and everything, right? But the whole idea is everything we do and everything we have comes from God, not just the natural rain and the natural sun. Everything, including our strength and our intelligence and our resources, our money, etc. It's a concept. It's a philosophy of life that is all connected to the Omer, to that tiny little bit of grain that we offer to God as a thank you, as a token of appreciation for everything we have. I think it's very humbling in life in general, to recognize that everything we have is not just it's not because we are so smart and so strong. Don't get me wrong, because I believe that this idea of thanking God is also making us sensitive to thank everybody else that did something so we can do what we do, or we can be what we are. That includes our parents, our teachers, our friends, our countries, etc. So I believe that this act of thanking God as a mitzvah is teaching you to be thankful. And again, I think I mentioned this many times. All the commandments that we have are not for the sake of God. You think God really needs your grain? You won't change God by bringing or not bringing the grain, or by saying or not saying thank you. But it will change you, because you will become a person that is thankful for other people, and you will appreciate what they do for you. We teach that little kids. I teach to my son. Say thank you. Right? They have to be taught. Usually, they don't do it. They don't do it unless you teach them to say thank you. And this is teaching us to say thank you, not just to God. Not just to God. David Pollack said, gratitude is a necessity. Yes, but we have to learn it. Somebody has to teach you that. And I believe that the counting of the Omer is doing that for us. That's why it's one of my favorite mitzvahs of the year, counting of the Omer. Because as we are going to see, it's not just counting for one night or one day on Pesach, the beginning of the Pesach. It's something that is going to continue all the way until Shavuot. Yes, the offering itself is at the very beginning, but then it's connected to a special counting that is going to continue day after day. More to come in a minute. Just stay there with me. Yeah, let's see. I love always the writings of Rabbi Samson Raphael Hirsch. And he said, when you have attained not only freedom, now he's connecting it with Pesach, right? But also national independence, which the possession of one's own land gives. Because remember, Rabbi Hirsch was a Zionist. And you cut the produce of the land, bring that which the land has produced into your own personal possession. Then bring the first Omer that you cut, means the amount that corresponds to one day's food, to the Kohen, to your representative in God's sanctuary. Okay? Now we understand why the Kohen that is also already connected to God. This cutting corresponds to the real harvest of the land: wheat, barley, oats, rye, and spelt. This Omer is brought from the barley, which is the earliest grain to ripen. And that's true. I talked to farmers, Israeli farmers, and they will tell you that the first grain is barley. So it makes sense that the Omer is from barley. So to the Omer, the law of waving is added, consisting of horizontal movements in all four directions, followed by moving upwards and downwards. It's almost like the lulav on Sukkot. By the procedure of waving, one's material nourishment, flour, one's well-being, oil, and one's mental satisfaction with life, incense, which are all represented in the Omer, are stripped of every idea of selfishness. Then this symbol of our earthly existence, with all its prosperity and joy of life, is placed in the temple to acknowledge that only through the Torah's ruling influence can we find our dedication to the community and to God. Beautiful. Beautiful, because remember, the offering was just weaving, and then it will be mixed with oil and things, so it could be presented on the altar. So that's very important also to understand. And yeah. And then, Debbie, what you said here, let's see. Barley is less important than wheat. Well, yeah, it's less important in the sense that we don't really eat barley so much. Basically, our breads are made with wheat, but barley ripens first. So that's why it's the very beginning of the harvest. Very beginning of the harvest. Yeah. Now, the thing what we have to understand now is that there is a connection. This counting that starts with the Omer is connecting Pesach with Shavuot. Why is that so important? When we have to understand that we, Rabbanites, the one who follow the teachings of the rabbis, we believe that Pesach and Shavuot are connected because Pesach represents freedom and Shavuot represents the Torah. And we all know that we cannot keep the freedom without a law. Societies don't work that way. So we need to connect the two, because freedom, just to be free from any kind of boundaries and laws, won't take you anywhere. You need to make sense of that freedom. You need to make sense of that freedom. That's why we connect Pesach and Shavuot. So with that in mind, there is a beautiful book that is called Sefer HaChinuch, which is a collection of the 613 commandments. I have some volumes in my office, by the way. It's very interesting, because we always hear about the 613 commandments, but sometimes we are not aware which one they are. And this book, what it does is to list the 613 commandments one by one. So I will bring it here, Sefer HaChinuch. It will say that the Omer is the mitzvah number 306 out of the 613. Okay? So it's talking about every single mitzvah. It's not as thorough as it's going to the Talmud and learning every detail, but it will give you a good example, or it will be very clear where from the Torah is coming. Okay, it will tell you the verse, and it will give you a little explanation of every mitzvah from the Torah, the ones we call Deoraita. And this is what Sefer HaChinuch says about the connection from Pesach to Shavuot. He said, the simple explanation is that the essence of the Jewish people is the Torah. Because of the Torah, the heaven, earth, and Israel were created. As verse states, if not for my covenant of Torah, day and night I would not have appointed the laws of heaven and earth. That's from Jeremiah. Okay, Torah is the foundation and the reason that we were redeemed and left Egypt in order to receive the Torah at Sinai and to keep it. So this is very clear that Pesach is not just freedom for the sake of freedom. It's freedom so we can receive the Torah. It's almost like we change one master, the Pharaoh, for another, God. Why? Because Pharaoh was a lousy ruler, made us suffer, made us miserable. So we dumped Pharaoh to become servants of God, the master of the universe, who is the one who created us. So that master knows what we need and gave us the Torah to help us succeed in life. It's like when you have to play a game, you need to know the rules. And what better way to receive this manual, this containing the rules, by the one who created the game? So that is Shavuot. Do you understand that? Shavuot is the day where we receive the manual so we can play this game that is called life by knowing the rules. Then of course you can succeed because you know how to play. And you can become a good player. Player in a good sense. Okay? So let's continue here. Since the acceptance of the Torah was the goal of our redemption and serves as the foundation of the Jewish people, and through it we achieve our greatness, we were commanded to count from the day after the first day of Pesach until the day that the Torah was given. This manifests our great desire for that awesome day, which our hearts yearn for, just as servants yearn for shade. We count constantly. When will the day come that we yearn for? The day that we left slavery? Because counting towards a certain date shows a person that all his desire and longing is to reach that time. But that's true. We humans, we count all the time. We count all the time. Okay? When you say, Shelley, here, barley is the foundation of some favorite beverages. Yeah, I think you're talking about beer, right? Yeah, although you can get good wheat beer as well. Anyway. So, yeah, so we count every day. We count every day because we humans, we count all the time. We count all the time. As you have a holiday coming up, we count. We count the days. Are you going to retire? You create a counter. Even before this class, I put a counter, right? So you know when the class is going to start. And so forth, we count things all the time. That's why we have watches. That's why we have agendas and smartphones and calendars and things, because we count all the time. But that's a sign of maturity, responsibility, and also that whatever coming is something important. Something important. So we want to know when it is, and we count every day because we are excited that this is about to happen. The only difference, this is a count up instead of count down. We're going to see that in a minute. So let me bring to you, where is it? Hold on a minute. Yeah, the Talmud explains. Because it says, Abaye said that there is a mitzvah to count the days, as the verse says in Leviticus 23, count 50 days. Okay, so basically the Torah will continue saying, after you present the Omer, this offering, you have to count 50 days. And it's also a mitzvah to count the weeks, as the verse says, 7 weeks you shall count for yourselves. In Deuteronomy. Furthermore, at the end of the Omer period, the festival is called weeks, Shavuot. So why it's called Shavuot? Because the Torah says that not only you have to count the days, but you also have to count 7 weeks. And that's the way we do it. And that's why when we have to count the Omer, we have a very specific way of doing it. So basically the way we count is, on the first day, we say, today is 1 day of the Omer, right? Until one reaches 7 days. Then one says, today is 7 days, which are 1 week of the Omer. You understand? So this is to fulfill the mitzvah of counting days and counting weeks, because both concepts are found in the Torah. Count 50 days and count 7 weeks. So whenever we count the Omer, we have to fulfill both. So we say something like this. Today is 8 days, which are 1 week and 1 day of the Omer. The day after will be, today is 9 days, which are 1 week and 2 days of the Omer, and so forth. Right? So, until we reach the 14th, for example, then we'll say today is 14 days, which are 2 weeks of the Omer. And then 15 will be, which today is 2 weeks and 1 day, and so forth, all the way until the end, until we reach 49 days. And this is Shulchan Aruch, this is Halacha, This is the way we do it. So if you want to be sure that you can't count every day of the Omer, which by the way we counted at night, the easiest way is either you join a minyan, so you count with a minyan so you won't forget, or you download an app that it will give you a notification so you can count every day with a blessing, because it's a mitzvah. So of course you have a blessing that it says Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu al sefirat haomer. We are acknowledging that God commanded us to count the Omer, which is a confusing name because the only time we present the Omer is at the very beginning, and nevertheless we call it the counting of the Omer. Amy Karlinski, hello, welcome. I will show you the Y that I have. It's called My Omer. I don't know if the logo is right there at the bottom. Let me see if I can bring it close to my camera. There, you see at the bottom right, it says My Omer. And then once you open it, you will have stuff like this. Oh, sorry about that, because it's a little greenish, the screen, and because you have a green screen, it's kind of confusing. That's the one that I use. It's apps for computer, cell phone. It's for cell phones. And I have an iPhone, so I don't know if it is the same for Android, okay? So I wouldn't know. So it's very convenient. Now, there is a trick, there is a catch, and if you didn't count the Omer from the very beginning, the halacha, the law is that if you miss a counting day, then you cannot continue with the blessing. You can still continue by counting the Omer by saying, today is 2 weeks and 1 day and so forth, right? But you cannot say the blessing anymore. That's the only limitation with this counting, because even though every day is a mitzvah by itself, because the mitzvah is to count 49 days, this 7 weeks, so you cannot interrupt it. Otherwise, it's an incomplete mitzvah, so then you cannot continue with blessings anymore, but you can still count, or you join a minyan and you say amen after somebody else says a blessing. But if you want to know the law, that's the way it is. Hello, Terry. Welcome. So, yeah, that's the way we count. Now, the other thing that I wanted to let you know about the counting of the Omer, unless you have any questions about the Omer itself. Also here, that I say we learn from the rabbis that there is a hint in the Torah that the Omer must be counted while standing. So we rise when we count the Omer. It says in the verse, from the time the sickle is first put to the standing wheat, you should begin counting. Okay? So this word standing teaches us that one should count while standing. So it's by analogy, because the sickle has to be standing, so we have to be standing. That's the way the rabbis decided that it should be down. The other thing we have to remember is the later authorities wrote that the counting may be done in any language, provided that the person understands that language. If he does not understand it, then even if he counted in Hebrew, he has not fulfilled his obligation. Since he did not know what he was saying, it is not considered counting. Beautiful. Terry, you say, Hevkal, you can import into your computer calendar. You don't know if show in the start said the one does that. I don't know. But as I say, I have this amazing app that is notifying me every day. But I also have it in my calendar. I have a calendar entry that it will give me a notification every day reminding me that I have to count the Omer. So yeah. Debbie Pollack, you have a question. I have a question from before. Can you reply? Which one? Let's see. Is there anything for computers? Not that I know of. Hi, Tracy. Welcome. I'm not sure if there is something for computer. I have an app, but it doesn't exist anymore. So, but it actually doesn't notify. It doesn't notify. It's called Kaluach. I'll show you here how it looks like. You have it there. I have it in front of my slides. So it's a Jewish calendar. It's great. It tells me all the times for Winnipeg. You can program it. Yeah, it's called Kaluach 3. I don't believe it exists anymore. So I just keep installing it from my backups. Okay, back to the class. Back to the class. So this is something that we have to remember. Okay. Hold on a minute. I wanted to say something. This. Before we move on to other things. It says, the Omer on Pesach. Listen to this. This is one of the most brilliant things that I found about the explanation of the Omer. The Omer on Pesach was from the barley harvest. The offering on Shavuot is going to be of wheat. Somebody mentioned that before. Barley is mainly food for animals. Wheat is food for human beings. We make bread out of wheat. The Torah hints to us that physical independence by itself, that means Pesach, still leaves man, from the Torah perspective, on the animal level. That means free without a law. Okay? We are like animals. The counting of the 49 days signifies a sevenfold refining process and marks our progress to full human status with our acceptance of the Torah at Sinai, 7 weeks after the Exodus. This is brilliant in the sense that this is another symbol. Why barley on Pesach and wheat on Shavuot? Because barley represents what animals eat, while wheat represents what human beings eat. Even more so, because on Shavuot, we don't bring wheat, we bring bread. Something that it has to be made using our brain. Human beings, eventually, they had to figure out how to take grain and make bread out of it, right? So it represents our humanity. So, yeah. So that's what we do. Yeah. Terry, you said I have a Pesach, not Omer question. Why can't you buy soft matzah and can only make it? Yeah, it's because it's so difficult to make matzah that the rabbis decided that unless it's made in a factory that follows all the protocols, because of the timing, from the time you mix the water with the grain, it starts fermenting fairly quickly. So it has to be very fast, the process, until you make it to the oven, because the oven will, the heat will stop the fermenting process. So it's a long time accepted halakha that only matzah that it was produced in a factory that follows all those protocols are kosher for Passover. Now, there are soft matzah that you can buy. It started to be a thing in the United States in some places because it looks like the original matzah was soft. And then eventually they started to make it like a cracker. But it doesn't make any sense because wait until after Pesach and try to do it yourself. You will see that it's not really hard. It has some softness to it. But yes, if you can find, there are some kosher manufacturers that now will produce soft matzah for Pesach that is kosher, if you're lucky to find them. Okay? But yeah, you cannot do it according to the rabbis because it's very complicated to do that. Very, very, very complicated. Okay, so now that we understand the counting of the Omer, that we do it every night, the 50 days, all the laws, and why we go from barley to wheat, that we have to understand is that there is also a few restrictions that we have during the Omer. And it's all related to the times of Rabbi Akiva. So long story short, before I read this, you have to remember that the first 33 days of the counting of the Omer is considered as semi-mourning period. And yes, Debbie Pollack, yeah. The counting of the Omer is an opportunity to refine our character. Yeah, very good. Which is interesting. The fact that you have to refine your character even before you receive the Torah. I think it's mind-blowing, the concept. You don't wait until the Torah will refine you. You have to be a mensch before you receive the Torah, which is that's basically all what we do during the counting of the Omer. But going back to this, according to the rabbis, the first 33 days are semi-mourning. So there are lots of restrictions, lots of restrictions. What is that coming from? Let's read a little bit about it. Rabbi Akiva says, if you have learned Torah in your youth, you must continue to learn Torah in your old age. If you have had students in your youth, you must continue to have students in your old age. As the verse says, in the morning plant your seeds, and in the evening do not let your hand rest. Interesting. They said that Rabbi Akiva had 12,000 pairs of students from Givat to Antiprat, and they all died during one period of time because they did not treat each other with respect. Do you understand what's going on here? And it's interesting that the Talmud will say that Rabbi Akiva had 12,000 pairs, which means 24,000 students. But why would it say 12,000 pairs? Because that's the way you count students in a yeshiva. They all study in pairs. They call the chavruta. That's the way the Jews traditionally study, with a body, Torah body. Okay, that's why the Talmud count 12,000 pairs. And say they all died. Why they died? Because they did not treat each other with respect. And again, what David says here is character refinement until Shavuot. These are the students of one of the greatest scholars that ever lived. And they didn't get it. They were expert in Torah, these 12,000 pairs. They were scholars themselves. Nevertheless, they were not a mensch. They were not nice people. They were arrogant, and they were making fun of other people, according to the tradition, by saying that they didn't know as much as they did. So every pair was mocking others, and they did not treat each other with respect. And because of that, it seems to imply here that they died because of that, because they were a bad example. Okay? Let's continue. The world was desolate until Rabbi Akiva came to the rabbis of the south and taught them. Well, in other words, Rabbi Akiva would say, you know what, all my students died, I'm out. Game over. Nope. He didn't quit. He didn't give up. He started all over again. He went to a different place, right? And he taught Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Shimon, Rabbi Eliezer, and Shammua. It was they who re-established Torah at that time. Amazing for Rabbi Akiva that he has the physical and emotional strength to start over again. It was taught that the 24,000 students all died between Pesach and Atzeret. Atzeret is another name of Shavuot. Rabbi Hama bar Abba, or perhaps it was Rabbi Chaya bat Avin, said that they all died a terrible death. What type of death that is referred to? Rabbi Nachman said askara, death by choking. Well, we don't know much about that, but the Talmud is saying that all these students died during the time from Pesach and Shavuot, during these 50 days. Why? Because they didn't refine their character. In other words, they failed to understand the message of the Omer, so the punishment was to die during the counting of the Omer. Is that clear? And that's why there is kind of this idea of that we mourn them from Pesach to Shavuot. But as we say here, Bereshit Rabbah, Genesis Rabbah says, Rabbi Akiva said to his new students, my sons, the first one only died because they did not look generously toward one another. One another other. Doesn't make any sense, right? No, one another. Pay attention that you do not act like them. So this is basically Rabbi Akiva is talking to us. So we should learn from that. But, and this is what I want to say, it is customary not to get married between Pesach and Shavuot because the students of Rabbi Akiva died during that time period, but it is permissible to get engaged. It is customary not to shave or take haircut until Lag BaOmer. which is the 33rd day of the counting of the Omer, when they say that the students stop dying. Aha! So Shulchan Aruch will narrow it down. We all know, according to the Talmud, that all the students died between Pesach and Shavuot, but when exactly between Pesach and Shavuot? By the time of the Shulchan Aruch, it was accepted that it was between the first day of the Omer and the 33rd day of the Omer, and then for some reason after that either they all died or they stopped dying after the 33rd day of the Omer. So the halakha for this day is that we have all these restrictions from the first day of the Omer until the 33rd day of the Omer, which we call Lag BaOmer, which is a very joyous day in the Jewish people. You may see some of the traditions that happen on Lag BaOmer when, for example, little kids get the first haircut on Mount Meron in Israel. It's one of the traditions. They have these bonfires and they have these big parties because they couldn't do anything like any of that before Lag BaOmer because of all the restriction. Now, how does it work in the liberal world, especially in many conservative synagogues? We do have the tradition to observe these restrictions, but only until Yom HaAtzmaut, in the sense that we recognize the state of Israel and we realize that after we celebrate Yom HaAtzmaut, we cannot keep mourning beyond that point. So that's a Shari Zedek tradition. We have all those restrictions. We don't have weddings, for example, from the first day of the Omer until Yom HaAtzmaut. Okay? Which is on the 18th day of the Omer. So we have only 18 days of restrictions in the conservative world on many synagogues instead of the 33 days of restrictions. Okay? But it's just one of the traditions that we have. And again, some people won't shave or won't cut their hair. That's another tradition that some people will have. Or they won't play live music during the restrictions of the Omer. Any questions? Well, thank you so much for everyone for connecting today, for taking a little bit of time during your day to study a little Torah. I believe that your soul will welcome you for investing the time to nourish your soul, your neshama, to enrich your Jewish existence by learning something new, by learning Torah. And remember, Torah L'Chaim is something that is weekly. We get together every single Thursday at noon, unless that I'm on holidays or something happened, but it's something that never stops. Never stops. As I hope your desire to learn Torah never stops. So keep nourishing your soul, keep studying Torah, because it's something that is the best gift that you can bring to your soul to do that. So thank you so much to all of you for being there. And remember, if you haven't done so, subscribe and hit the bell so you will be notified every time we go live or every time we upload something to our channel. Give us the thumbs up and hope to see you soon. Remember, we have Iskor on Sunday. Iskor on Sunday. Service starts at 9 Winnipeg time, and their Iskor will be close to 10 a.m. just in case, so there is no confusion. 9 a.m. service, Iskor at 10. Hope to see you then. Bye now. Chag Sameach, Moed Tov today, but Chag Sameach in advance, because the last day of Pesach is also a Chag, it's also a festival. So stay safe and enjoy the rest of your day. Bye everyone.